IT Synergy President Michael Cocanower joins us this week to touch on news from Dell, ConnectWise, and NinjaOne, and share his take on the state of cyber insurance and ransomware as a service, plus a special guest interview with TCM Security founder Heath Adams on learning to be an ethical hacker. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 214, Beware of Ladders. And welcome to ChannelPro Weekly, episode 214. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for folks out there like you. And who are you if you were to stand in a mirror, you know, like the kind of you see at the store where you can kind of look at yourself from all sides? You're going to see, well, hopefully you, otherwise you're invisible, but you're going to see someone that is an MSP, a VAR, a system admin, an IT integrator, an IT consultant, a security advisor, someone who works with other businesses implementing technology solutions. That would be you. If that is not you, then you're going to learn a lot, and you might want to switch careers by the time this show is over. So we're glad to have you, one and all. Joining me each and every week is the man of the hour, the guy who keeps the planes from crashing here at ChannelPro, executive editor Rich Freeman.
Hey there.
Good to see you, Rich. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. You know what? I've been off the road for a few months at this point. I think since, other than a little vacation travel, since the beginning of November, I'm coming up on the first business trip of the year here. But you know what? It's been good, just kind of hanging out at home for a while.
That's not normal for you, sitting around at home, although it's been kind of your normal the last couple of years, a lot more sitting at home, but less so these days, right? Are you happy to be back out on the road?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I really am. Yeah, the second half of last year, it wasn't quite, back to normal in terms of the frequency of trips and so on, but it was a lot closer to it. And that was after like whatever, a year and a half, 15 months or something of no business travel. It was great. It was just nice to see people again in the flesh. And so I'm looking forward to it again. It's as we get started shortly.
Fantastic. Yep, I know my first trip's coming up as well here in March. We're going to talk about that for a sec. We do have a guest on the show. We're going to introduce him in just a second, but I alluded to my little trip in March. That is going to be for our ChannelPro SMB Forum event that's coming up in Newark, New Jersey. Rich, what might people learn at the ChannelPro SMB Forum should they attend?
They are going to learn a ton from experts and from their peers about some issues that we know are really top of mind for our readers right now. So we've got a security-oriented session in which some MSSPs, security consultants, penetration testers are going to be telling real-world frontline stories for you. Interesting stories. They're always fascinating stories, but also very instructive. We've got a whole session dedicated to employer recruitment and retention, which is a giant issue right now out there. And just to kind of keep it lively and interesting, we're going to format that like a game show, like the dating game. Those of you my age or older might remember from way back when. We've got a session, sort of a case study session about making money in Microsoft Azure. We know from research we've seen relatively few channel pros right now actually have an Azure-based offering, but a very big number of them want to add one within the next couple of years or so. So we're going to give you some ideas about how you might do that, where you might get started. And then we have a session that, among other things, and this is another sort of game show or TV-inspired event, that we're going to kind of build around the Survivor TV show format. But among other things, it's going to help you think through how to deal with the merger and acquisition climate out there right now, which is an interesting issue and something that I'm sure everybody here is kind of trying to think their way through. So great stuff in a lot of different areas that we know folks in our audience care about.
Awesome. And if they wanted to attend, where would they go? How would they do that, Rich? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to answer my own question for once, because I don't get to talk all the time. That's not fair. Okay. What I'm going to do, folks, if you are listening to the audio version of the program, go to channelproforum.com/Newark. If you go there, that'll take you right to a registration form. If you're watching on YouTube, we're going to throw a graphic up that's got a QR code. It's going to take you to that same URL, so that way you can register right now, right away. Use code CPVIP. That's our exclusive code for you to register with. That will get you in the door for free, so you can join us anywhere. If you're anywhere in the New York metropolitan area, It's easy to get to Newark. Go. You're not going to regret it. You're going to learn a lot and have a great experience. And of course, we've got other shows coming up throughout the year. Rich, registration for most of those is open. Where are we going to be in 2022?
So we're going to be in your backyard in Chicago in May. We're going to be in Dallas in June. And I don't want to get the months wrong, so I'll just focus on the cities towards later on in the year. We'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina. We'll be in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, right around Dulles Airport, and then we'll be in Southern California. I believe that one is in November.
Fantastic. If you want to learn more about those shows, if you're not in the New York area, go to events.channelpronetwork.com, and there you'll be able to learn about all the other shows that we got going on, including our virtual events, which one is coming up in May, I think, is our first ChannelPro virtual.
April. First week of April is our first of 2 cybersecurity online summits this year.
Wow. So it's all barreling upon us very, very quickly. It's exciting stuff. I did say we have a guest. He's been waiting patiently in the wings, and I really appreciate that. And I'm really excited to have him back on. He's been on before, and it was just awesome when he was here, and he's agreed to come back and do it again with us. He is the founder and president of IT Synergy, which focuses exclusively on providing strategic technology management for small and mid-sized organizations. He is a certified ethical hacker, counsels customers on a world of cybersecurity and risk management, and serves on numerous boards and advisory councils. Please welcome back Michael Cocanower. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to ask that we stop the podcast right now, because as many people do in Zoom meetings these days, I'm sitting here analyzing your background, and I am seeing, so I start out with seeing a significant investment in legacy Nintendo hardware, which I am absolutely wowed by. And I don't know how many podcasts we've done together, and I don't know if maybe you had your background blurred before, but I feel like I've never seen this. And then after I get over the shock of this legacy Nintendo hardware, then are those CDs over there as well? I mean, is this just like a whole legacy library we have behind you?
Yeah, so back there, it's on all the shows. I'll even push my head back a little bit. You'll see
nice.
more of the systems, and there's some more up there. I got more in the museum in the office, but I've got I've got a lot of NES. I've got some SNES stuff. I've got a Virtual Boy up there that you can't see because it's out of frame. Pretty much every video game console, Xbox 360 and before, minus Atari. I didn't go back to try to collect any of that stuff. But the interesting thing about my collection, and thank you for noticing and asking about it, is that a lot of that stuff is not, it's not a lot of stuff that I went back and like, oh, I need to collect and hoard this. Usually those are the games that I acquired through my youth. A few were added after the fact, but that's my youth right there in that bookshelf. I got a Genesis up there as well. The CDs are a lot of PlayStation games and some PC games. I do have audio CDs on the other side in the other room. So yeah, lots of cool legacy stuff. Do you collect? Do you have video games you collect?
I don't, but I just feel I know you and Rich have planned for some amazing topics during today's podcast, but I feel like we should just stop right now and let's spend the hour talking about that.
Well, maybe Rich, we'll plan a special episode where we can get Michael back and we can just talk about old NES games. Did you have an NES when you were young?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
what was your top? Normally we save this for the end of the show. Top three NES games that were your favorite. Go.
I mean, Zelda's got to be in there. I mean, how can you talk about NES without Super Mario, right? The third one I'd have to think about a little bit more because so much time was spent on those first two.
very
especially
cool.
Once you get the cheat code for Super Mario that allowed you to get like an infinite number of lives or whatever it was, and then you could just play for hours and hours and hours. So
the most popular example of that was Contra. If you knew the Konami code, you could get 30 guys and get through that game pretty easily. And I don't know how you beat that game without 30 guys. It's impossible.
Right.
Yeah, Zelda would definitely be on my list. Probably Super Mario Brothers 3 would be on my list. I loved Tecmo Super Bowl. I'm not even a huge football guy, but I played a ton of that game back in the day. So fun stuff. You and I will have to reminisce on old games one of these days. And if I catch you in a live event, I'll bring my emulator and some controllers, and you and I can sit down.
There we go. We'll duke it out.
And duke it out over some stuff. So it's great to have you on. So less about me. Tell us a little more about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I founded IT Synergy about 25 years ago. As you mentioned, we focus on small and mid-sized organizations, but the important part about your intro was really that strategy focus. So I think that's what differentiates us from a lot of other folks, not everyone, but we're very focused on Yeah, we all provide help desk. That's a largely commoditized service. We all provide hardware. That's certainly commoditized at this point. But where we really try to help our customers is thinking a little bit higher level about their technology, thinking more strategically, thinking big picture rather than just how many tickets do we close, how many patches do we install, those types of things. You know, we like to talk about how are we moving the business forward.
And what kind of got you going in that direction? Because I know you're also you're an ethical hacker, and we're going to be talking to another one of those down the road a little bit later in the show. But what kind of set you down this path in your career?
Yeah, so it really comes back to what we call our why. So we don't have a mission and a vision statement. We have a why, and our why is creating positive experiences with technology. And so if you can imagine, like, you know, the first time you maybe like showed your mom some new app or some new way of doing something, or showed somebody a more efficient way to do something on their PC, and they have this moment where they're like, wow, that's so cool. Like this app is going to change my life, or whatever else. That moment is a positive experience with technology. And what we talk about here is it's creating those moments is what gets us out of bed in the morning, right? Like, you know, helping you fix your printing problem, we'll do that, but that's not what gets us out of bed in the morning. It's really this creating positive experiences with technology. And so by having that strategic focus, it really allows us to think a little bit more around, you know, what's the positive side of technology, and not just always like, oh, what's not working today, or, you know, what's stopping me from being productive or whatever else. Let's talk about, hey, we put up this new dashboard of metrics in your manufacturing company and you were able to increase output by 5% as a result. Like, that's positive experience with technology. That's the stuff we want to do for our customers.
You know, I'm curious, Michael, because some people love this term, some people don't love this term. Do you talk to your customers at all about being a virtual CIO? Do you have a virtual CIO service, or are you essentially providing that kind of service, but you don't really label it that way?
Yeah, we absolutely provide that service. You know, I don't know that we label it a whole lot, just because I'm not sure how much that particular term, that specific term, resonates outside of our industry, right? So if I just go to a CEO from company X and say, oh, I'm your VCIO, I don't know if they know what that means. You know, they have lots of different terms for it, like, oh, is our outsourced IT director, or our outsourced, you know, whatever. I mean, there's lots of different ways people refer to it. 100% are providing that service, but the only way that we provide it is bundled with our managed services. So we don't, like, somebody can't just come in and say, I want to hire you to do VCIO only and nothing else.
Very cool. Well, it's awesome to have you on, and I know we have you kind of for a limited time, so I want to. You've been on before. We'll put a link to the last show he was on, because I know we talked a lot more about kind of his background and what he does and what they do there. So we refer you to go check that show out too. It's also a great show. You don't want to miss it. But we're going to go ahead and plow through the news so we can get to our discussion that we want to get to, which is around security trends. As there's going to be a very security heavy show this week, but it's going to be well worth listening to every minute, I guarantee. We do have some news that we're going to touch on. Dell is in the news, ConnectWise and NinjaOne, but they're not super huge stories. But we want to make sure we touch on those for you, and then we can kind of get to that. So strap in, folks. It's going to be an awesome show. You're not going to want to leave even for a second. Rich, tell us about Dell. They've done something to their partner program, something around rules. I'm sure it's important. What is it?
Well, Dell's fiscal year begins in February, so it began just a few days ago. And every year, beginning of February, they come out and announce to their partners what changes they're making to the partner program. So that happened Monday this week as we record this. The biggest change they're making, and I'm not sure how many people this will affect, but basically they took, in essence, 3 different programs for their reseller, cloud service provider, and OEM partners, and sort of consolidated it all into one program. So there's going to be a unified set of tiers, unified set of requirements, unified set of benefits. The thinking behind that is just that you know, we are moving out of an era in which partners tend to wear one of those hats only. There are plenty of partners that wear 2 or more of those hats, and so it just kind of makes sense to consolidate their experience and their interaction with Dell. Interestingly enough, that is exactly the same thinking that went into Intel's partner program overhaul. They rolled out an all-new, hugely consolidated partner program just over a year ago, and it was the same basic idea. We've got all these different partner programs, and some people belong to 2 or 3 of them. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Beyond that, mostly what they talked about is just some changes, some tweaks they're making essentially to incentives, but this could add up to dollars and cents for Dell partners out there. So They've added a new accelerator, a new incentive for sales of mid-range storage products, which is Dell, I think, kind of hitting the accelerator on that. They've been doing really well in the mid-range segment of storage right now, and I think they want to take advantage of that. They've added what they're calling a 2% incremental rebate kicker to the Tech Refresh program. The Tech Refresh program basically is where they reward partners for going to customers with older infrastructure and getting that customer to invest in an upgrade. That program up until now has been 100% focused on storage, actually, but one of the changes for this new fiscal year is that they're adding servers to Tech Refresh as well. And then the other thing that they've done, there's another incentive program they have at Dell. It's called the New Business Incentive Program. So Tech Refresh is about upgrades. New Business Incentive is about landing new logos, net new customers. And they are adding sales of displays and peripherals to that program. So you were kind of chiefly rewarded for other kinds of sales, but now they will give you a little credit for selling displays and selling peripherals too. So those are the big ones that they announced this week.
So good changes, bad changes. What do you think? Michael, are you a Dell partner? Do you do anything with Dell?
Yeah, we are a Dell partner. I should add a little bit of a disclaimer that just product sales in general are not a huge part of our business. Generally 10%-ish of our overall revenue. So you know, given that hardware is normally high dollar in terms of revenue, that means it's particularly not a big part of our business. But what I will say, in looking at some of the changes that Dell made, and as Rich pointed out, very similar to some changes that Intel has made, and I would argue there have even been other companies over the past couple of years making this change, is that I'm definitely very appreciative of the trend of moving towards, you know, I'm a managed service provider. I want to engage with vendor X. Help me to do that, rather than, you know, as vendor X, we see these 4 buckets and you need to fit into one of these buckets. And if you fit into 2 of these buckets, we're going to engage with you completely separately and independently of each other. And so this trend of moving to, hey, I understand IT synergy, you want to do business with Dell, and so we're going to help you do business with Dell, whatever that happens to mean and wherever that happens to touch our internal structure and product groups and that kind of thing. I think that's a really, really great trend. And I think ultimately will help to kind of deepen and accelerate the relationship between the partners and the vendors.
And hopefully those buckets are big enough that you don't get stuck.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it looks like a lot of good stuff in here. Rich, anything you want to particularly highlight as important or interesting, or should we just send folks to go check out the details on their own?
I'll drop one quick little last thought, and we don't really have to kind of get into it, but one of the things that might wind up being more important than it looks right now about this is by folding the OEM partners together with the other partners, it's the OEM part of their business at Dell that does edge computing. And I've been hearing more and more chatter from Dell in the last 6 months or so about edge computing and their interest in getting partners that don't do that now involved in that area. And I suspect bringing these 3 sort of different partner tracks together will be something that gives them an in, basically, to encourage more of their partners to sell more of their edge computing stuff.
Yeah, we talk about edge computing a lot, it seems like, the last few shows, at least this year. So lots of exciting stuff happening there. There is a lot of information about these changes in this article, folks. So go to channelpronetwork.com, get the show sheet for episode 214. Got all the links for you there on your phone. If you're listening, probably open up the description on your phone, and you should get the links there so you can kind of read along as we go through these stories. If you're watching on YouTube, hello, hit the like button, hit the bell, subscribe. All those things you have to do on YouTube these days. There's lots of things you have to do, but also leave a comment. Those are really, really helpful. We want to hear from you. But you can open up the description area there on YouTube as well, and we put all the links there for you, so you can easily follow along and get all of the details while we kind of cover the high level and give you our thoughts. ConnectWise is in the news this week. They have named some leaders and stuff. Emphasis on the stuff. Rich, tell us what's going on with ConnectWise.
And you know what? I'm going to pull NinjaOne into the same conversation here, because there is a common theme to both of these news stories that happened this week, and that is the totally unsurprising but hugely important emphasis that companies that make RMM software are placing on security these days. So ConnectWise actually named a number of different leaders, and one of the things they did basically was completely reorganize the product-oriented part of the company. And so they've created 4 of what they're calling innovation business units. There's one that's dedicated to ASIO, which is this new next generation platform that they rolled out at IT Nation Connect late last year. There's another focused on security, another focused on monitoring and management, a 4th on their business management products, which I guess would be PSA and quoting and so on and so forth. So basically, they took the developers and the product managers who do the marketing and so on and put them into the same organization under the same leadership. Each of those units is led by a GM. Each of those GMs reports straight into Jason McGee, the CEO. The other thing that they did at ConnectWise was hire a new chief information security officer. Now, they had one before, and he is not leaving the company. I don't know what his new title will be now, but he and his team are sticking around. But they brought in somebody new. His name is Patrick Beggs. 20 years of experience in the industry. He has worked for Amazon Web Services, for Bank of America, for the Department of Homeland Security. So they're bringing in maybe somewhat heavier artillery in the security space to kind of beef up the protection for their products. This is coming just a few months after Kaseya, for example, hired a new chief information security officer who used to be a fairly highly placed agent in the FBI in their cybersecurity arm over there. And same week that NinjaOne, a company that some folks out there probably still think of as Ninja RMM, but Ninja has definitely gone in the direction of creating an entire suite of products. They rebranded late last year as NinjaOne. And they hired not a chief information security officer, but a chief trust officer, which is a slightly different role that they say combines the functions of a CISO with those of a chief privacy officer and a chief risk officer. And so essentially, this person they hired, his name is Mike Arrowsmith. He comes to them from Splunk and from a company called Guardant Health that does oncology, cancer-related biotech. He's going to be in charge of product security, but also data integrity. And that's why they're calling him a chief trust officer as opposed to a chief information security officer. Here too, it's not as if they weren't thinking about security at Ninja before, but they're making a serious investment there to protect the products, protect the data in those products. And in particular, in their case, there's a reason they hired somebody with a lot of experience at Splunk, which is a much bigger and very fast-growing company. Ninja itself is a fast-growing company right now. I don't know if this figure is even accurate still, but as of a few months ago, last September, they were adding 300 MSPs a month. Revenue grew 75% last year. So they're growing fast. They can see that finding the right balance between growth and scale and security could be an issue. And so they want somebody in that chief trust officer role who has some experience there. And that's exactly what Mike Arrowsmith kind of had to deal with at Splunk, is making sure that company didn't compromise on security because it was moving and growing so fast. So again, common theme, ConnectWise and NinjaOne and Kaseya last year for that matter, is that you're seeing makers of IT management software, put a little bit more of their money where their mouth is and going out and hiring security-focused talent to keep those products safe.
Yeah, that's a lot of personnel movement into these spaces. I guess that's the nice part about using chief in titles is because if you have a chief information security officer and you hire another chief information security officer, that one title just becomes chief information security officer, and then you can just stack that up. So you could have the chief of chiefs. Does that title exist? The chief of chiefs?
It should.
If it doesn't, make that role today. So Michael, you're big in the security space. How important is it for companies to have people in roles like this and to bolster those areas?
Yeah, so obviously I certainly applaud these vendors making any type of investment in cybersecurity, whether it's hiring personnel or technology or whatever else the case might be. To be totally honest, I was a little annoyed. I mean, there's an old saying in security, which is there's two types of companies out there: those that have been hacked and know it, and those that have been hacked and don't know it yet. And so, when the Kaseya breach happened last July, I think a lot of their competitors kind of used that opportunity to take some shots at them, which I didn't think was cool because, okay, Kaseya is in that first group of they've been hacked and they know it, but all these other companies that are taking shots, it's like, guess what, guys, you're in the second group, which is you've been hacked and you don't know it yet. So be careful about what you say. And so, there's absolutely no question in my mind, in terms of top things that keep me up at night. It is, my tool set and some kind of breach of my customer environments that comes through me. And we've seen, obviously, Kaseya was a good example of that. A lot of these supply chain type attacks that are happening that way. It's concerning, and I think it has pointed out the lack of investment over, let's say, the past decade that a lot of these vendors have made in security. So I am certainly happy to see the investment in security. I hope that investment continues. And I just hope that it's enough to help mitigate the risk of an entry point coming through me, because that and not only does that scare me, but I mean, ask anybody in the industry today, how's it going with their cyber insurance renewal this year, and what kind of increases are they seeing in premiums? I mean, this stuff is hitting us financially hard.
You know what, this is, if you don't mind, Matt, we can just kind of go right into the security conversation here, because that was the perfect bridge to one of the things that I wanted to talk about with you, Michael. We were trading emails just yesterday about some of what's on your mind in the security realm right now. And cybersecurity was one of those things. And we were talking to somebody on last week's show about how crazy it is right now, getting coverage, renewing coverage, the difficulty of that, the requirements that the cyber insurance companies are putting out there, because they underestimated their risk, and they're getting hammered by it as a result. So, I mean, just as a starting point, I mean, what are you seeing and experiencing out there in cyber insurance right now?
Yeah, so this is my take on the situation, which is not necessarily backed up by factual data. This is just what my gut tells me, but obviously, the prevalence of ransomware has increased exponentially the past few years, and to where now that's pretty much the primary means of most attacks. And certainly, we've got a lot of very large, well-organized criminal syndicates that are executing these attacks. And I think that, in my opinion, I think that the insurance industry reacted a little bit slowly to that. And I think that they didn't start taking precautions soon enough. And as a result, the last couple of years, I think the insurance industry has gotten burned badly in terms of, ransom payouts and claims, and, having to bring in a large amount of resources for incident response and legal resources and all these other things that your insurance company brings to bear. And so I think the insurance companies have just gotten their clock cleaned. And I think because they didn't react to it quickly enough and sort of, incrementally start to pull back, the let's say freedom that was associated with getting underwritten on an insurance policy previously, and they didn't kind of incrementally add restrictions to underwriting policies. That now what they've done is they've just gone, wow, this is awful. We've lost our shorts the last 3 years, and so they've now swung the pendulum so far in the other direction that it's starting to get ridiculous in terms of some of the requirements. Like, what we're seeing now is, across a lot of our customers, we're seeing insurance companies provide conditions for underwriting a policy that aren't even technically possible, simply because these are actuaries and underwriters that are creating these requirements based on what they've seen. Like, oh, well, company X got hacked because they didn't have this, so we're going to tell everybody they need, like, two-factor authentication. We're going to tell everybody they need two-factor authentication everywhere. Right. And so the problem is, once that starts to get down to the nuts and bolts, as a technologist, you look at that and you go, okay, well, there's lots of places where it's super easy to put in two-factor authentication, but there's other places where, for technical reasons or whatever else, like it's not just a turn it on, turn it off type of thing. But they're saying like the people who don't understand technology are writing these requirements and saying, well, if you don't do it, we're not underwriting the policy. And even if you come back to them and say, no, you don't understand it, you can't do it. Like that's not how this works. That they don't understand, and so it doesn't matter to them. So we've actually seen some insurance companies take some very interesting tacks the last few months as we've gone through underwriting with customers. And we had a customer that was renewing a policy a couple of months ago. The insurance company did something we've never seen before, which is they came back to the customer and they said, okay, we're going to underwrite the policy, but you need to do these 5 things, whatever the 5 things were, enable multi-factor authentication, whatever. So it was a laundry list of things they needed to do. And they said, until you've done those things, if there is a claim, an incident, a breach, ransomware, whatever else, your deductible doubles and you're on the hook for half of any ransom payment. After you have done these 5 things, your deductible goes back to normal and we will pay 100% of any ransom that gets paid out. And so that's just an example of some of the things we're starting to see where insurance companies are starting to say like, hey, we're not going to take on 100% of this risk anymore. And that part I understand. I mean, obviously we all want insurance companies to remain viable businesses. So I get that. But like I said, I think the pendulum is swinging too far the other direction where now you have non-technical people writing technical requirements that like you can't, they're just not possible. They can't be done.
It was one of the 5 things that they came back with, like something that actually can't be done. Like, okay, you need to enable 2FA and you need to have an analyst come in on your network and make sure that these things are set up. And you have to solve world hunger before we'll
it might as well have been that, because that was equally as likely to happen as some of the things that they were asking for. In fact, maybe that would have been easier. Maybe we would have preferred that it would have been solve world hunger.
It's interesting because once upon a time, there was a line of thought about cyber insurance companies and the requirements attached to these policies that, these might actually be a good thing for the world. I mean, to the extent that these policy requirements were driving SMBs to do things that they should have done before and hadn't done before, but now you got to do it or you're uninsured. Maybe this is actually kind of helpful. But it sounds like we've gotten to the point now where that it's not a question of requiring that prudent controls are in place. Now it's almost like they're looking for excuses not to be providing adequate coverage.
Yeah, I would say what you said is 1,000% correct in terms of, I mean, there's a couple of sayings we have. Number one is the insurance companies have been our best salesperson for like the last 2 years in a row. Because they're things that we've been telling our customers for years, the insurance companies are now saying, well, we're not going to insure you unless you do that thing that this guy over here has been telling you for the last 3 years. The other thing is, I feel like what we tell a lot of our customers is we generally run 2 to 3 years ahead of the insurance company. So whatever I'm telling you you need to do today, you can choose not to do it if you don't feel that the risk is great enough or whatever else. But probably within a couple of years, your insurance company is going to tell you have to do this. So you might as well get it in place today.
Most of the complaints I'm hearing these days and the headaches around cyber insurance, and there are a lot of them out there. Most of what I hear from people is that it's getting coverage, renewing coverage, retaining coverage. I haven't heard as much talk recently about claims and claims being denied and unreasonable interpretations of claims. I don't know if that means that this isn't as big an issue or if it's just not as big a headache as these other things we're talking about. I mean, what's the claims landscape look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, we haven't had to be involved with a whole bunch of customers that have had to make claims. My experience generally is anytime there ever has been a claim, there hasn't been much of an issue. That part hasn't been much of a challenge. I also haven't anecdotally heard a lot of stories from peers or others that's been a big challenge. That being said, I think any claims that are made today are more than likely made under a policy that was underwritten several months ago before we started to see some of what we've seen just in the past few months about the stricter underwriting requirements, these kind of ridiculous technical requirements that are coming out, that kind of thing. So I would say if we have this exact conversation again in a year, it may be a totally different conversation regarding claims and how that process goes should you have to make one.
If you can, Michael, touch on the costs a little bit too, because I'm sure we've heard a couple of guests say that that the cyber insurance costs are starting to also get just as out of control, that it's getting to the point where small businesses may not be able to afford cyber insurance. Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, mostly because we don't get involved a ton with the costs in terms of our customers. So I can speak to that in terms of our own costs, and then, you know, just informal discussions I've had with peers, kind of comparing notes on what their costs are. And I can tell you, within our industry, within the managed services providers, we're seeing massive year-over-year price increases in terms of our cyber policies. And obviously, you know, depending on the coverage you have, our cyber policies, of course, cover us. But a lot of MSPs now are also getting some level of coverage that will provide some type of protection for their customers if the customers get hacked as a result of the MSP getting hacked. But absolutely, I mean, the cost for our insurance policies has just been going through the roof. And it's difficult because, you know, I mean, I can't go to my customers and say, well, you know, my insurance went up by 15%, so I'm going to be increasing your prices 15%. I mean, you know, they're just not going to accept that. I mean, sure, an inflationary increase, you know, 3, 5, whatever percent, okay. But, you know, 15%, no way.
So I want to talk a little bit about another topic that you raised in your email to me yesterday, and it reminded me immediately of another conversation, an interview we did on this podcast. This is like years ago now. I'm not even sure how many years back, but we had somebody from Sophos on the show talking about ransomware as a service. You know, he kind of walked us through one of these storefronts, essentially, on the dark web. Very slick, user-friendly, point-and-click kind of storefront. You really didn't need, you know, a lot of technical chops to create an account and get yourself into the ransomware business. The difference, though, or the trick, was that you kind of had to bring your own list of email addresses and sort of run the business on your own in terms of collecting the ransoms and figuring out how to launder that money, or, you know, whatever that involves. So it was a very easy way to get into the business and to automate a lot of what you would be doing, but you were still required to do some of the work. Based on that email you sent me yesterday, Michael, it sounds like the ransomware as a service services out there these days are really, they're taking care of the whole deal for you at this point. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have the word ethical in my certification of certified ethical hacker, I think I'd be looking at real estate in countries without extradition treaties to the US right now, and finding a nice place to live to set up shop, because you're absolutely right. I mean, yes, the trend that you pointed out is accurate, that you know, a number of years ago we started to see these ransomware as a service where I don't have to know how to write the software, I can just rent the software and go and install it. But there was still a fair amount of technical skill required, because I had to figure out a way to get that software into an environment that could be ransomed. That industry has continued to evolve in a couple of respects. Number one is the ransomware providers, so to speak, have continued to evolve their business and made it easier and easier and easier to kind of handle the entire process. So, you know, as you mentioned, they can now handle the money collection, they can handle the data exfiltration, the publishing to the dark web, the threatening to release that, you know, I mean, the whole thing is just a service, right? And they're doing it all for a cut of whatever funds are collected. So they've made that side of it a lot easier. But then the other thing that's happened even more recently is there's now an entire cottage industry of what they call IABs, or initial access brokers. And these are people that I can pay. So let's say, for example, I wanted to launch a ransomware attack against the ChannelPro network. I can go out and hire an IAB for whatever price they're going to charge me to get me access into that network. And so now I don't even have to know how to do that part. So I can hire an IAB that gets me access. I can hire ransomware as service. Once I have access, I can put the ransomware in. And literally all I'm doing is just kind of an orchestrator of subcontractors, and then sitting back and collecting 70% of the proceeds, and, you know, with the other 30% going to the ransomware as a service guys. And so it's gotten to the point where it just takes almost zero technical skill to be able to do this stuff. And to me, that's a concerning trend, because there's no limiting factor anymore.
I mean, do you think the fact that it's become that easy to get into ransomware, essentially all you need is a total lack of conscience, right? It is because the ransomware volumes continue to explode.
Yep.
You know, is part of that there are a lot of very unethical people in the world, and the bar to becoming a criminal has gotten really, really low.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so much of this is being run by, as I mentioned earlier, very large, very sophisticated organized crime outfits. And there was a statement made on a breach incident that I was involved in about a year and a half ago, and there was an outside incident response company that was brought in, and they had this great term as we were negotiating with the criminals, which is, he said, remember, these are rational decision makers. And meaning that they're running a business just like you're running a business or I'm running a business, and they're going to make economically motivated decisions that make sense from a business standpoint and that type of thing. And so just like I'm sitting here trying to grow the revenue of my MSP, they're sitting there trying to grow the revenue of their, criminal organization. And so they're coming up with these products and making it easier and more customer service friendly and, all these other types of things. And it's nuts.
It makes me want to cry. So how do we stop this? Is it even possible?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I suppose if I had the answer to that, I would not be talking to you all. I would be, sitting on my luxurious beach estate on the island that I owned, and, with the yacht parked at the dock and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that I have a great answer. Certainly this is all financially motivated, right? So if we all decided at once that we're not going to pay another dollar of ransom, right, the industry would shut down very quickly. But the issue is, and I completely get it, a business owner is forced into the position of, what am I going to do? Pay the ransom or completely lose my business, which is potentially my life's work and, a huge percentage of my net worth. And so they pay the ransom, which I understand. I'm certainly not criticizing that decision. And so, short of cutting off the money, and obviously, not to turn this into a political discussion, but it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of production and progress being made in talks between the U.S. and Russia at the moment. And, so a lot of these other countries that, don't think super fondly of the United States are not really going to help a whole lot. And so I don't know the magic answer on that.
Well, I've got one more security topic that I kind of want to get your thoughts on, and it's related to something that happened this week, but also something that's kind of been in the back of my mind for a while. So this week, Enable, the managed services, RMM, PSA, backup, security, et cetera, that company issued a press release in which, and it was sort of in partnership with SentinelOne, which is, one of the biggest, if not the leading name in EDR software. And the two of them essentially came out together and said, and I can even quote it from this press release, quote, "A growing number of Enable partners have replaced legacy AV solutions with SentinelOne EDR." So replaced antivirus with EDR. And part of why this kind of jumped out at me just a little bit is I've had conversations in recent years with executives from EDR vendors who, maybe not so surprisingly, have told me, you really don't need antivirus anymore. You may not even benefit from antivirus anymore. What you need is my product. You can replace antivirus with EDR and you're going to be providing more effective security. So I'm just curious on your perspective. I mean, should people, do you think of antivirus and EDR as complementary layers, or do you kind of see them as different sorts of endpoint security solutions and you have a preference for one versus the other?
Yeah, a couple of answers to that question. So first of all, I don't know that, just to start out, like, we are absolutely huge advocates of EDR. I agree with everything in this article about the necessity of EDR. For our customers, it's basic table stakes. We now have a policy internally that we're requiring all of our customers to run our EDR solution. We happen to use Carbon Black, which is, the other kind of 800-pound gorilla next to SentinelOne. We require it of all of our customers, and we have reached the point internally where we will terminate the relationship with a customer if they refuse. Like, that's how important that we think that it is. I personally have not been brave enough yet to say we don't need antivirus, so we still run the two side by side and look at the function that they provide as being different, somewhat complementary. I agree that I think that the EDR portion of that is more important than the antivirus, but I'm not willing quite yet to abandon antivirus altogether. But I agree 100% that antivirus alone is not enough. EDR is table stakes today. It's a basic requirement. And like I said, our customers that refuse it are not our customers.
Well, and to circle that around with the insurance discussion as well, I have to imagine that insurance companies are probably going to start requiring EDR as
We've seen that.
Yeah, as basics. Yeah. So if you have a customer that's being difficult about adopting something like that, what do you do? How do you get them on board?
Well, I mean, first of all, I like to think that we've got a pretty compelling story around why this is necessary and what the table stakes are. I mean, we had a customer that went through, I may have even talked with you guys about it before, went through a breach about 1.5 years ago. They were right in the middle of a pilot of Carbon Black, and Carbon Black picked it up but couldn't totally stop it because they hadn't yet authorized us to install it on every computer, just a small subset. And so we tell that story, and we tell how if Carbon Black had been everywhere, we're fairly confident that it would have foiled the attack. And that particular incident involved a multi-$100,000 payout in ransom. And for this particular customer, the Carbon Black that they were, had we fully deployed it, had they bought off on our solution, it would have ended up, I don't remember, about $1,500 a month. And with a multi-$100,000 ransom payout, it would have taken a lot of months to add up to the same amount. And so it's just a super easy decision. So we tell that story, and we talk about, why it's you're going to feel so silly at turning down our request to charge you $1,000 a month for this product when you sign that check for $500,000 or $1 million in ransom. And so far we've had very, very little pushback. We actually, out of all of our customers, we had one that pushed back. And when we told them this was a deal breaker for us, and if you don't do it, we'll help you transition to a new IT company, they said, okay, we'll do it.
I guess being able to walk away is a powerful statement to its importance, I suppose.
Yeah, but it was a lesson learned from us from this issue we went through with a customer, because, as managed services providers, the nature of our agreements is they're a fixed monthly fee. And so when this type of thing happens, I mean, we had to invest a tremendous amount of resources in cleaning this up and in working with the customer and the incident responders and all these other parties. And so for us, it's just not worth the risk. Like if you as a business owner aren't willing to mitigate that risk with a small monthly expense, then we're not either. We're just, if you can take on the risk, but we're not. So, good luck.
Very interesting, and a lot of good sound advice, a lot of good insight there. And I want to say thank you for coming on and to talk about that kind of stuff. We've got more security discussion ahead. We're going to be talking with Heath Adams from TCM Security. We're going to talk about ethical hacking and more about that. So unfortunately, Michael, we had to record that earlier because you weren't available, but I'd like you, if you can, to stick around, and we'll have you on part 3 on the other side here, just briefly to say goodbye and wrap up. So folks, we're got a big, nice interview ahead. Stick around. We will be right back. Welcome back to part 2 of ChannelPro Weekly. When you think of a hacker, you might picture someone in a black hoodie and sunglasses sitting at a desk in the dark with like 6 screens going and their fingers flying on the keyboard. But the reality is that a hacker may be the person you're sitting next to, and may not even be the kind of hacker you'd mind having around. In the fight against the nefarious, we need an army of white hat or ethical hackers working to help find the weaknesses in your partner's networks and systems before the black hoodied kind does. And here to talk more about ethical hackers, what it takes to learn how to be one, and why you'd want to, is Heath Adams, founder of TCM Security. Welcome, Heath.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate you being here.
It's awesome having you on. There's a million things I want to ask you, because I find this to be like a fascinating topic. But first, let's start at the high level. Tell us just a little bit more about you and a little bit more about TCM Security.
Yeah, so my name is Heath Adams, and as you mentioned, I'm the CEO of TCM Security. So we are a consultancy and a training organization. So we kind of have a split there on the consultancy side. Anything that you want broken into is kind of what we do. So networks, web applications, even physical buildings we'll break into. And on the training side, we teach all of what we do, essentially. So we started as a YouTube channel that kind of grew and blew up, and now we're training organization with over 200,000 students teaching ethical hacking. We've got certifications now to assess ethical hacking, and are growing in both fields over the past few years.
So what kind of got you interested in hacking? Was it were you doing some IT work and you needed to break into something? How do you get involved in that?
To be honest, I was working help desk, and one of my coworkers was like, "Did you know that there's a field called ethical hacking?" And I was like, "What do you mean hacking can be ethical?" So I always pictured it as somebody like a guy in a hoodie, kind of like you alluded to, and just that it was bad people doing hacking. And so I went home that night and started researching Reddit and anywhere that I could find information about what an ethical hacker was, and I just started pursuing down that path nearly immediately. Like I knew that was immediately what I wanted to do for my career, and I just kind of worked my way into it.
So when you got started, did you go to the store and get like a nice lineup of hoodies to wear while you were learning how to do this?
You know, all my hoodies are primarily black, so it's pretty cliche, but I don't know if that's par for the course or not.
Hey, if you're gonna do it, you may as well fit the role and stereotype well, right? So that's probably a pretty good place to launch our discussion, and maybe just talk a little bit about what an ethical hacker is and kind of what they do.
Sure. So ethical hackers are hired by organizations to break into something. So it could be a network. Often it's a network. Sometimes it could be a web application, or again, like a building. It could be IoT devices, wireless networks. The range really varies. Essentially, you're trying to see and assess the security of your application or network device or whatever it might be, and do so before a bad person finds the vulnerabilities that could be there. So it's becoming more of a compliance thing as well. Like organizations like PCI, for example, require an external pen test, meaning can we break into you from the outside looking in, and can we get into your network from there? So organizations are starting to require that, and so businesses are starting to fall in line and get these done. It's becoming more of a prominent thing than it was maybe even 5 years ago.
So, you know, you started out at the help desk and got into cybersecurity and ethical hacking from there. A lot of folks in our audience can identify with that. Is more or less anybody listening or watching right now potentially suited to hacking, or is there a particular kind of temperament, skill set? Do you have to be a particular kind of person to get into hacking?
Yeah, so I do think anybody can do it. I just think that you have to be of a certain mindset to be successful in the field. There's a fine separator of people that think it sounds cool, and then the people that actually go out and do it, because it is a lot of work. It's one of those fields that is constantly changing. There's new bugs out, there's new hacks out. You have to be on top of things from a offensive and defensive mindset. So it's one of those fields I tell people, if you're not 100% passionate about it, you're not somebody that likes to study consistently. Like I probably put in 5 to 10 hours a week just staying up to date on what the newest and latest bugs are, and how to make sure that my clients understand the risks that are involved with that as well. So perfectly capable, anybody's perfectly capable, doesn't know any age, any background, anything like that. Hacking is for everybody, and it's something that if you're curious about it, dabble in it, see if it's something that maybe interests you. And if you find a passion and it takes off, then, more power to you. We could always use more people in the field.
So as Matt mentioned, you teach a class, an ethical hacking class. It's like 25 hours long. I won't make you, give away your best secrets, but part of what you say on your website, people will learn in the course is, a typical day in the life of an ethical hacker. And you were kind of talking about, the time you spend every week keeping up on threats and techniques and so on. I mean, tell us a little bit, what is a day in the life like?
Sure. So it varies from organization and job task, but I'll kind of give you a breakdown on some of the major pen tests that we might do. So I kind of alluded to external pen tests. That's outside looking in. Essentially, can you be hacked as an organization from anywhere in the world? Doesn't matter where you're at. So what we really look at there is we start to look at what's called open source intelligence. And we start to identify who are the employees of the organization, what might be your email format, Have those employees or the organization ever been involved in a breach? Are there any password or information data out there already because of these breaches? And can we start compiling information about these organizations? And then we start looking at things like login panels. Can we break into Office 365 or somewhere that might have, possibility of a weak password, something like a winter 2022 exclamation or company name 123 or something that's easily guessable. And then is that organization, do they have strong password policies? Are they utilizing multi-factor authentication? Or can we just walk right in, get into the email, walk right in, log into the VPN, and break into a network from that organization? The other side of that is what's called internal pen testing, and that is Active Directory based for the most part. I think majority, I've only seen one internal pen test that didn't have Active Directory of some sort involved. So we start to look at what I call quote unquote features that kind of ship out of the box in Active Directory. And there's a lot of features that are inherently vulnerable that if you've never been through a pen test, you wouldn't know exists. And it allows us to see, can we compromise the domain controller? Can we compromise users? Can we get somewhere within, if we were to break into a network or social engineer or drop a machine from a physical engagement, just plug it in and walk away, what are the dangers and what can we do once we're inside of a network? So those are two really big ones. And then there's wireless pen testing that's involved in that as well. And then the other big one would be web application. That is becoming increasingly popular. I think there's more websites than there are networks at this point. So just assessing what the vulnerabilities are from a website. What can you do as a unauthenticated or authenticated user? Can you abuse certain privileges? Can you make the application do something in a way that wasn't intended? And just finding those bugs and, again, trying to find them before somebody, comes around and does it for malicious purposes.
I'm going to guess just shy of 100% of the people in our audience right now work regularly with Active Directory. So what's the first default setting they should go change after they're done listening to the show? What's
Sure.
like one great example of something really dangerous?
Disable what is called LLMNR. So it's link local multicast name resolution. Essentially what the protocol does is it acts like DNS, and it's trying to respond to messages that are coming across the network. So if DNS isn't working and you try to go to a file share, for example, and you mistype the file share, what happens is the server will say, or maybe the domain controller will say, I don't know where that is. So what you do as a user is you send out a broadcast message to anybody on your network and you say, hey, does anybody know where this address I'm trying to get to is? And what happens is when you send that out, you're waiting for a response, and we can sit in what's called a man-in-the-middle position and respond to that request. When we respond to that request, the next default action is that a username and a password hash gets sent over. So that hash can then be taken offline and cracked. If the password's weak, it'll be cracked very quick. The hash can also be relayed in other attacks, which starts chaining other default settings like SMB signing not being required on workstations, things like that. So the LMNR is like the first baby step of getting out of some of the bad things that can happen within a network, because it does provide a password hash, because it can be relayed and we can authenticate without ever cracking a password. We've taken down all types of security just with that, that being enabled and being by default out of the box Active Directory setting.
Is penetration testing the one or the main way that you kind of put your hacking skills to work, or are there other ways that being a hacker, having that skill set, contributes to what TCM does?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. So it's almost a mindset and just looking at things from different perspectives, and even I don't know, like being open to the community and being open to say like, we can see what attacks are out there. We can see that'll help us be better defenders. We open up our website to public access, and if anybody wants to try to hack us and report it, we're open to that as well. I think it's just getting into the mindset of saying like, hey, nothing is 100% secure. Even as a security company, we're not going to say we can't be hacked, because I think that would be pretty blindsided. So it's just one of those things that it makes you more aware, makes you more cautious, maybe even more paranoid. But I think from a business standpoint, it helps with being able to do the pen testing, do the training, even be better defenders, and just be better security personnel overall.
Yeah, I mean, talk about that a little bit more. So, I mean, for somebody in the audience who's thinking, I'm not going to add a penetration testing service to what I do today, so do I really need to, go through the trouble, make the investment to become a hacker? I mean, how could the average MSP, the average solution provider, benefit from becoming an ethical hacker and having that knowledge and those abilities at their disposal in terms of protecting their customers better?
Yeah, so I think you have a few options. You have one, hire within, or hire somebody, right, or train somebody. Train yourself, depending on what you can do, or bring in a third party to do assessments for you, or even white label services is a potential there as well. Something that I could think about back when I used to work help desk is that we had pretty much the same password for every single, and same setup for every single domain that we set up for clients. So we had a checklist, and if one client was vulnerable, then they're all going to be vulnerable to the same thing. And if so if one client had LM&R enabled, they are all going to have it because that's how we set it up. Or if one client had the same Active Directory domain admin password, then guess what? They all have the same domain admin password. And so if you hacked one MSP client, the chances are you're going to go hack them all. And I'm not saying that's the same for every MSP, but I bet there's a lot of MSPs out there that follow the same kind of criteria. And so it's one of those things that even if you don't become a full-fledged ethical hacker, if you start to go learn about some of these, attacks that are out there and some of the reasoning behind why these are bad, and just starting to make these small changes within your networks and your clients' networks, it's going to make your job a lot easier, especially from a defensive standpoint when hacking is still a growing thing. Ransomware is a growing thing, and that's probably the last thing you want is for one of your clients to get get ransomware or something along those lines, or get hacked or anything. So especially that can propagate into another client and go client to client. So it's one of those things where you don't have to become a full-fledged, but even learning some of the attacks and techniques that are out there can be incredibly beneficial.
Last year on the show, at one point, we were talking with a penetration tester like yourself, and he told us a story about, being hired by a company to physically break into their building. And the way that they did that was by putting an intern inside, a case, almost like a casket. And then the company accepted that delivery from what looked like FedEx to them. And this was how they got somebody inside the building. What's maybe the wackiest way that you've actually compromised a physical site that you're penetration testing?
Yeah, so there was a video that came out maybe a year or two ago that said anybody with a ladder is like immediately trustworthy. So we've started bringing a ladder on site to a lot of our physical engagements, and it works so well because people will hold a door for you. People just assume that, like, if you're doing things in broad daylight, for example, picking a lock on a door, people are just like, well, they must be here because nobody, or they must have a reason to be here because nobody would just be picking a lock in broad daylight. That's absolutely crazy. Same thing with like the ladder or those types of scenarios. It's really just getting into the organization and looking like you belong. That's really what's important. But yeah, our last engagement that we did was maybe couple weeks ago. We dressed up like AT&T, had full get up, full uniforms, had a ladder, and everybody believed that we were AT&T. And it's really what it takes is just having a cover story, making sure you're sticking to it. And I think the ladder trick has been incredibly beneficial for us.
Well, I'm never going to trust anyone with a ladder ever again.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't.
You kind of stole my question, Rich, because that's what I wanted to ask about was some of the interesting physical things. As part of your class, I don't see it listed as a skill, but if you're going to do physical penetration testing, would taking a class in acting or something like that be a useful skill to have?
Acting would be good. Any sort of like psychology, understanding like social engineering tactics. There's good books on those that are out there. And just understanding like the human desire, I think, to want to help, essentially, and how can you abuse common human traits? But there's also books that go into more detail, like what happens if you're challenged or what happens in certain situations and how you can get yourself out of that. So I think acting is a part of it. Psychology is a huge part of it. And social engineering is absolutely the biggest part of it, because chances are, yes, you can get by probably picking locks or bypassing some features of a door, but your best way into an organization might be social engineering, or even going outside to a smoking area, lighting up a cigarette and striking up a conversation with somebody to get you let in the smoking door that they go out of. So it depends on the situation, but you can absolutely increase and improve your skills by picking up acting and psychology, etc.
So it sounds like humans always tend to be the weakest link, and exploiting them is usually the easier way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to always be the number one problem. You can have a perfectly defended system, and all it takes is one human to let somebody in the wrong way, and it can go south pretty quick.
Sounds like it'd also be good to have a good costume person, like a nice tailor who can make those things for you.
Yeah, it's incredible the tools that you need, and you have to source for some of these situations. We had to outsource some of them for the last one, and some of the stickers we were getting made, the guy called and was like, "What are you doing?" Because I'm very, obviously you're not AT&T, so why are we printing these, and can we do this legally? So sourcing like badge printers and being able to print legitimate stuff out and doing that all on your own can get pretty expensive pretty quick.
We do conferences at ChannelPro, and we our first one of the year is coming up in a few weeks in New Jersey. One of the sessions, we're calling it the Security Slam. We're kind of building it around security-related stories from experts like yourself, and the idea is, each panelist is going to tell a real-life story about an incident they responded to, or like a really dumb kind of security decision that they saw an end user make. And the story itself will have some entertainment value, but we're kind of hoping people will learn some lessons in terms of protecting customers better that way. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I mean, maybe getting more onto the non-physical side of what you do in terms of security. I mean, does any story come to mind that's just especially interesting or egregious that could teach somebody in our audience a lesson?
Yeah, so I've got one that comes to mind, and this is really just to say that a lot of times, I would say a lot, there's a chunk of the time that we're treated kind of as the bad guy. The ethical hackers treated as I'm here to get you fired, or I'm here to make you look bad, and I'm going to attack your baby and beat it up and tell you all the things that's wrong with it, and why it might be ugly. And so we get some confrontation occasionally, and people that try to maybe resist us to make us look better, or make themselves look better, or kind of cheat the system a little bit. And there was one time that we had an engagement in. Basically, we had broken in from the outside, and so we got in. We're on the VPN. Essentially, we gotten a password from a user on the VPN, and when we do that, I immediately stop and I call the main person to contact at the client, and I called him. I said, "Hey, we're into your network," and he said, "Okay, what kind of user are you?" I said, "Well, we're just a regular low-level user," and he's like, "Oh, that's it? There's nothing you can do. You're done here." So immediately it was like, okay, well, challenge accepted. And we start doing the LM&R poisoning, the basics of basics. And the first hash that we capture is his hash. And we crack that password, and it's his name with a 1 after it. And these are Active Directory domain admin credentials with weak passwords. So not to taunt the pen tester is probably item number 1, but it goes into being receptive and understanding, and I think as time goes on it'll be better, but there are situations we get into where it gets pretty hostile, and people treat you like you're the bad guy, and just understanding that we're here to make your security better and help you understand why things are wrong, and we're never out to attack anybody. Even if we social engineer somebody or get somebody to click a link or submit a password, it's those people become your biggest advocates. Those people become the people that say, "Hey, I fell for this. Let me explain to you why this is bad. Don't click this link." And I think those are the best people to keep around, as opposed to firing somebody for a bad decision. So we always advocate for that as well. But so there's a million stories, but that's the first one that always comes to mind, is the guy taunting us with the weak password and not understanding what we'd be capable of doing. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, talk about getting the last laugh. Um, so, I want to take advantage of the fact we've got a security expert on the show with us. So you're an ethical hacker, but I'm sure you're well aware of what the unethical hackers are up to out there right now. I mean, as you kind of look at the security landscape right now at this moment, are there trends or patterns or activities that particularly concern you about the unethical hacking activity out there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's still targeted at quick wins. And something that we say from a security standpoint is it's kind of like your house. Like you want your house to be less desirable than your neighbors. So if that adds like adding a security camera, adding some lights, even you don't want anybody to get broken into, but if somebody's going to get broken into, you'd rather be your neighbor than yourself. It's a same kind of situation in security that we're seeing a lot of trends of, funding not being there, maybe for some organizations, or basically attackers are trying to attack the weakest links that they can, get into organizations and ransomware them, get a payment, get out. Hackers are lazy. They just want to get as much money as they can in a quick fashion, unless we're talking nation state where they're then going after specific targets or protected IP or something along those lines. But from a common, medium, large size business or government entity or anything like that, I think still ransomware is probably the biggest threat. And it comes down to, honestly, training is the biggest thing right now, is making sure that you're having constant training sessions with your employees. What does a phishing link look like, or a phishing email? And they're always getting creative and good. Making sure that they're understanding protocols, who would be asking for your credentials or who would be asking for a password. Would anybody ever ask for that kind of information? And then just setting up things that can protect you as an organization that aren't incredibly difficult to do, like a better password policy. Enabling MFA on everything that you have out there externally facing, making sure that, yeah, the users might complain, but this is for their own good. I think that's the biggest pushback we get as well. People are going to complain if we increase the password policy, or people are going to complain if we enable MFA. Yes, it is growing pains to get through, but it's so much better to have than to not have, because we can just walk right into a network if we don't, if those things aren't enabled. And all that's stopping somebody from breaking into a network and getting somebody's password is just time. And hackers have unlimited time. So if they're going through and they really want to attack your organization, that's what we tell people. We only have like 5 days most times on a pen test. So if we don't get in a password, doesn't mean that somebody who's really motivated to attack you and has unlimited time won't figure out your password, especially if the password policy is weak. It just takes the right time, right guessing, et cetera, et cetera. So, enabling these things, these easy kind of check marks, and then making sure that your users are trained will prevent a strong majority of attacks, and make sure that or would encourage attackers to go elsewhere and look for somebody else to attack, because they, at the end of the day, they want to make quick money.
How much confidence do you have? I'm working right now on our state of the channel, annual state of the channel report. Our cover story for the next issue will be about the results there. And one of the things we ask our readers every year is, how much confidence do you have in the tools that you're using to secure customers? And I mean, the answer actually is more confidence than you might think, but there's definitely some apprehension about how good these tools are. So, I mean, awareness is very effective, MFA very effective. How much confidence do you have, should people out there have, in the tools that they're probably leaning on beyond those techniques, email security tools, antivirus, EDR, whatever? How effective ultimately are those at protecting companies?
Overall, pretty effective. The thing that you have to keep in mind is that we never know where the next 0 day is going to be. It seems like Microsoft gets hit with a lot of them, but the Exchange 0 day, for example, you're sitting there running a patch server, you think everything's fine, and then somebody finds a 0 day and propagates it around the entire internet, and all of your external facing Exchange servers are now vulnerable to this, right? So it's like one of those things where you have to keep skepticism always, in the sense that layering defenses, you can't just say, oh, I've got antivirus, I'm good. Because antivirus can be bypassed. Even if it's latest and greatest, something could happen there. Or I've got XYZ service, I'm good. You got to layer in the defenses on top of all these things. So I think the more that you layer your security, the better off that you're going to be, and the more confidence you can have. But trusting a single anything can be hacked. So I would say trusting a single item, a single software, a single idea is one of those things where it's probably not the best idea. And it goes back to even with the password policy we're talking about, like having strong passwords, great, but we could still guess a strong password. We've cracked 20 character passwords before. So just because you have a long password doesn't mean it's incredibly strong. So if we get through and get the strong password, then is there MFA? Okay, well, then that's another layer of defense we have to get through. Now, if you have MFA, are we going to be able to bypass it? Are we going to have to do social engineering? Okay, well, if we have to do social engineering, how well are your users trained so that can we get this password or this credential? But it's just layering that on. So the first step there is having a strong password policy. If you have that, you're already making my life more difficult. Then the MFA, then the social engineering training. And there's just these layers of stuff that you can do to become more confident, but you shouldn't trust any one layer individually, if that makes sense.
That's really good advice. And you've talked about passwords and that. What from an ethical hacker's perspective are some of the most common security mistakes that you see when you're out there?
Yeah, I think it's honestly from a external facing perspective, it's usually passwords or a misconfiguration of some sort. It could be default credentials or exposing data that you don't want exposed. What I tell people is again, more house analogies, but from an external to an internal asset, externally we have much better protection. We have potentially like a house, we might have locks on our doors, cameras, dogs, lights, whatever it might be, alarm system. People are scanning the internet 24/7. So if there is something like a glaring remote code execution where I can just run code and get a shell is what it's called back, and we have command line access, chances if I can do that, then a bot has already done that. So when we're going externally looking for those things, we're not going to see those unless a 0-day comes around, and then everybody's racing to fix those, like the Log4j that we just saw recently, where everybody's racing to fix that. It's one of those things that internally it then becomes more like the wild west. In your house, you might not even have locks on all your doors. Patching might not be the best, but externally we're talking we're most likely talking password policy, configurations, multi-factor being there or not, and then what applications are you serving up third party. If you have like something like AWS, are you exposing S3 buckets? If you have a GitHub, are you exposing source code? What are those things that are out there from an intelligence standpoint? That's really what we look at, is mostly open source intelligence. What can we gather about you from that side of things? So that's the biggest side. On the internal of a network, then we start talking about Active Directory and the features of Active Directory that may be out there and vulnerable out of the box. So.
Very interesting stuff. I want to talk a little bit about the course that you offer and get a chance to go through that. So it talks a lot about what an ethical hacker is, but it gets very, very granular and very, very in depth. It talks about some of the tools that they'll use. What are some of the tools that an ethical hacker uses?
Yeah, so I think Google's the number one tool. You can use Google, you can do research, you got a place in this field, but it's one of those things that some of the common tools, it varies from engagement to engagement, but you might hear tools like Nessus for vulnerability scanning, Burp Suite for web app pen testing, Metasploit might be used. There's a toolkit for internal pen testing that's called IMPacket, IMPacket, and that is, it's like Swiss Army knife of all different kinds of cool tools that you can use internally. Tools like Nmap, there's a variety, and then there's tools off GitHub that you might download that serve a certain purpose, or there might be scripts that you run to automate some of these processes. So there's a tool for everything, and really a lot of it's going out and doing research and saying, hey, I'm looking for a tool that does this. Is there one on GitHub? What are the reviews on this? Is it it's still good? Is it still relevant? But those are some of the common tools that you might use as a pen tester.
Cool. And then any other comments about what other things they would learn in your course if they wanted to take it? Tell them about just the high level overview of what they're going to learn.
Yeah, so a lot of it is touching on foundation. So we try to incorporate it for anybody that's kind of still getting started. We cover coding, Python. We cover some Linux introductory, and then building out with Bash scripting, and then even cover some basic network concepts. We tell people like having a network plus level of knowledge coming into the course will make it a lot easier, because it's like a house, you want to have strong foundation before you build upon it. same concept here. We put building blocks together where we start with the foundational concepts, and some people start our course as like, hey, none of this is hacking. Well, you got to have the foundations before you get into the meaty stuff. And then we layer on top of that, and we do get into hacking. We start with, there's 5 phases of hacking, but the most important starts out with reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, kind of like we talked about with the who are your users, what data are you putting out there, what intel can we gather about you, and then doing scanning and enumeration. So running a tool like Nmap, what ports are open on a machine, are any of these services vulnerable to an attack, and reviewing those, and then getting into exploitation. And once you build those basics, then we start going, okay, how do we perform an external pen test? How do we perform internal pen tests? And a lot of the course hits heavy on Active Directory because it's such a important topic. And then gets into web app pen testing and wireless pen testing, and finally gets into report writing as well, just to understand what a good report should look like, how you should convey what you find to a client as well. So it's built and geared towards people interested in getting into the field, but it also, we get people taking it from interested in how to become a better defender, or how to detect these things, and what kind of attacks are out there, and what should I know, even from a knowledge standpoint. So even if you're not, looking to become a pen tester per se, it's still one of those courses that could be good to just enhance your knowledge of what are the common attacks that are going on in today's world.
Cool. And this is not the only course you offer. You offer lots of other courses. I hit the course, the all courses link, and I was like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff here. What would be like if, for someone who wants to be an ethical hacker, or if someone who's just a managed service provider working with networks, what courses do you think would be a good fit for them?
Yeah, so it depends on the foundations that are there and what you want to do. We have Linux and Python courses geared towards building foundational skills, but we also have the ethical hacking course, which is probably our most taken course. We also have a course on phishing, as an example. We've got some advanced courses that may or may not be worth taking at this point from somebody just looking to get started, but we even have like courses on malware and how to identify malware, and that could be useful if somebody's tracking, something that came into the environment. How do I safely look at this or evaluate what this might be? So there's a variety out there. I think you have to assess, where am I at in terms of my foundation. If you've never used Linux or Python before, probably good to start there, and then start to build into the ethical hacking items. And if you want to get more advanced and go beyond that, you can. But we offer courses on like mobile hacking, and we got more coming out. So it's really, what are you interested in, and what will keep your attention span. So
very cool, very cool. And we'll put a link to your website in the show notes page, so that people can go and find information on this course and others. Just as a last question, since I got time for one more, what does a white hat hacker like you, Mr. Heath, do for fun when you're not hacking?
Sure. So outside of work, I'm big on sports. So my thing has always been basketball, though I will watch pretty much any sporting event that you put on TV. So my wife and I, we go to a lot of basketball games, and pretty much just I feel like our life outside of this is pretty much basketball, and just going and watching and trying to relax and take your mind off work for a little bit.
That's good, because I know some people who are like, they have IT jobs, and then if I ask them that question, they'll say like, well, I go home and I play like games on my computer. So it's like, okay, so you're on your computer 24 hours a day, right? Like, so that's cool. Yep. That you were able to unplug.
I try to. I play video games when I can, but you got to get away from the screens and kind of just try to disconnect for a little bit. So going to the games helps out a lot, but even when we're home, we're in front of screens if we're watching the game. So I feel like we're always if you're not in front of the computer, you're in front of your phone. If you're not in front of your phone, you're in front of the TV. So yeah, getting away and just being able to disconnect when you can is definitely beneficial.
Fantastic. Well, unfortunately, we are now out of time. Heath Adams, founder of TCM Security. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today. It's very, very insightful, very enlightening. I'm sure you're gonna get a lot of people interested. For those who are interested, where can they get a hold of you? How can they find you?
Yeah, so our main website is tcm-sec.com. So -sec like security.com. If you're interested in the academy, there's a link on there, or you could go to academy.tcm-sec.com. Otherwise, if you wanted to reach out to us, info@tcm-sec.com.
Fantastic. And I hope that they do. And I hope that we get you back on sometime down the road to talk about more hacking and ethical white hat hacking topics in the future. And with that, we're going to say goodbye, and we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, hopefully our guest, Michael Cocanower, will be on with us on the other side. And thank you again to Heath Adams for joining us. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back in just a sec. And we are back with part 3 of ChannelPro Weekly. A great interview with Heath. I know, Michael, you didn't get a chance to check that out, but I'm sure you will once this gets posted. But it's a really good interview. Learned a lot of interesting things. I think you'll agree with a lot of the things that were talked about and discussed. Rich, any highlights from that interview that you want to point out?
You know what struck me, there was a lot of interesting stuff in there, but what struck me most and what I'm curious now to learn a little bit more about is the Active Directory part of that conversation. And for Michael's benefit, our guest was kind of talking about the importance, the value as almost like a very basic thing to do with your customers to shut various services in Active Directory down. If they don't really serve an essential purpose, kind of shutting them down is a really easy way to make customers more secure. And as he was talking about it, I just thought, I don't hear enough about that. And it's, everybody's using Active Directory. It's probably something that everyone who reads ChannelPro or listens to this podcast can and should do. So that was really interesting to me.
Because it was a fascinating interview, and we got a lot for that. Unfortunately, Michael, I know we're almost to the point where we're out of time with you. We had a hard stop for you at the top of the hour here, so I wanted to give a chance to let folks to have you say goodbye and to thank you for coming on. For those who wanted to learn more about you, get in touch with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
Yeah, best way is through our website, www.itsynergy.com. You can read more about us and what we do. As we talked about at the outset, we do a lot around kind of the strategic side of technology consulting. We also have a very heavy focus on financial services, working with registered investment advisors, SEC compliance, all those kinds of fun things. So definitely can check us out at www.itsynergy.com. Also, just want to thank you guys. It's always so enjoyable to do this with you. I always enjoy the conversation. Super engaging, great topic. So thank you again for having me. It's always a blast.
Thank you so much for coming on. I always look forward to when you join us, because it's always, like you said, a really good discussion, fascinating stuff. You're like a super duper smart guy, so you know all this stuff inside and out. So it's great to have you, and I'm sure we will have you back again. Thank you again, Michael Cocanower, IT Synergy. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. Rich, I kind of skipped over a quick plug that was at the top of the notes there, because I was trying to make sure we had time to say goodbye to Michael properly in part 3. But I want to go back to that plug and let you talk about what that is, which was something about M&A Today. It sounds like something you'd see on like broadcast TV. Is that like a new talk show?
Well, if it is, it's a brief 1-episode talk show, but it is very worth checking out for everybody in the audience, because again, and this came up at the beginning of the show, I mean, it's craziness out there in mergers and acquisitions right now. And that means that, I mean, if you are halfway good at what you do, you're probably getting calls from, private equity firms and larger MSPs who are curious to see if you are selling your business right now. We've heard on this podcast within the last few months that the biggest problem that private equity buyers in the MSP land market have right now is finding high quality firms that are willing to sell. Like they've got tons of money that they can't spend because nobody is taking it from them. So it's a seller's market, and that raises a lot of questions about whether or not you should sell, and who do you sell to, and how do you do that. And so this week on ChannelProNetwork.com, we posted a webinar that I recorded this week, actually, with Nancy Sabino. She was our guest host on this podcast once upon a time. She sold her business last September, and she was generous enough to agree to come do a 40-minute webinar with me and just talk that whole process through, the thinking behind why I'm selling, when I'm going to sell, who I sell to, how do you begin that process, who do you need on your team when you're negotiating, et cetera. If any of that is on your mind, I really, really recommend you take the time to check out this webinar. The name, as you said, Matt, is M&A Today, a first-person look at selling your business. It's up on our homepage now, but you can get to that. We'll have a link, obviously, in the show notes, and you can get to that through our website anytime. And timely stuff, interesting stuff, and I encourage people to check it out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. I didn't know that something that you were doing. And Nancy's a fabulous person. Really insightful, engaging, very interesting individual. So I bet that's going to be well worth everyone's time. Is it a long view? How long does it take to get through it?
I wasn't kidding. It's like just under 40 minutes. So you don't even have to, open up a big hunk of your day.
Fantastic. Well, folks, definitely go to the show notes and check that out. I'm sure it'll be awesome. It's a bummer we couldn't have Michael stick around a little bit longer to play a game of 5 questions or have a little fun, but I'm sure the next time we get him on, we'll do that. But Rich, I guess, unless you want me to endlessly drone on about my video game collection, which I'm more than happy to do, maybe we should just go into telling us what we might have missed throughout the week and what might be coming ahead.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If you want to find out what you might have missed during the week, the thing you want to do is go to channelpronetwork.com every Friday and find our In Case You Missed It post written by ChannelPro's own James Gaskin. This week, he's going to be taking you through the new phones and tablets that Samsung just announced. The folks at Vade Secure, we've been talking plenty about security. They just got a patent, actually, for a new phishing awareness technology, training technology that they created. You can read about that there. And then there's a new cloud XDR solution from CyberReason. And I won't even go into the details, but Florida Man has returned to In Case You Missed It for the first time in a while. And James will have some interesting thoughts about that. And then coming up next week, it's the first ASCII Group MSP Success Summit event of 2022 in Houston, Texas. ChannelPro will have a couple of folks on the ground there, actually. And then we've got a little cloud news coming up next week for Microsoft partners, though Microsoft itself won't be involved, and that's as big a hint as I can drop. But we will, I'm sure, have the details for you on this show in a week.
Fantastic. Something to look forward to. Another great show, but again, very security heavy this particular time around. But amazing and insightful stuff. What a show this was. And a big thanks to Michael Cocanower for coming on and joining us and talking about those stories and talking about ransomware as a business and cyber insurance. It's something that's affecting everybody, folks. You gotta be up to date on all this stuff. And that was all really good discussion. Also, big thanks to Heath Adams at TCM Security. Please go check out his courses and look at what it might take to be an ethical hacker and something you might want to incorporate in your business, because I think it's probably a skill set that's going to get more and more important as you go to try and secure your customers. Rich, do you agree?
Totally. Yep.
So go and check that out. We got links in the show notes for all of those things. And with that, we're going to say goodbye, but we will be back next week with episode 215. Rich, since we got a minute, you want to plug who's coming on next week?
Yes, our guest host is our good friend Bob Coppage, coming back for the first time in a while. That will be a lot of fun. And then our interview guest is Frank Vitagliano, longtime presence on the channel for the last few years. He's actually been on the show before too, come to think of it. He's the head of the Global Technology Distribution Council, and we're going to have an interesting conversation with him about the world of distributors right now, because there's been a lot of change going on there.
All stuff you will not want to miss. So make sure you tune in next week for that. And what's the easiest way to do that? Subscribe to ChannelPro Weekly in any of the various podcast services. That way it just magically shows up as soon as we have a new episode there. Please leave a rating and a comment. That always goes a long way and is good. If you like to watch, we're on YouTube. You can subscribe to us there, hit the bell, hit the like button, leave a comment there. And of course, tell a coworker, colleague, friend, someone else who might like the show. Tell them about it, so that way you guys can listen together and talk about the various topics on the show with us. And it's always more fun with a friend, isn't it, Rich?
Absolutely.
And of course, tune in to channelpronetwork.com each and every day. That's where you'll find the latest news, articles, white papers, resources, downloads, everything and anything you need to know to either make your business better, stay on top of what's going on in the industry, and help you make more money. Always important stuff. Follow us on the socials. We're there. We'll get links to them all over the website. You'll be able to find them there. So follow us on all of them. And with that, we'll see everybody in episode 215 next week. See you then. All right.